Hello, sixth graders. It's Mrs. Ward, and I'm going to read chapter 13 from Sparrowhawk Red. So we were seeing that Ricky and Soledad were working together, and they seem to be becoming better friends. So we're going to continue on. Chapter 13. Even after a rusty sunset touched the evening sky, Soledad kept working. She ran up to Ricky, waving a can of shoe polish. "Boy, I can make money now," she exclaimed, prancing about. Ricky helped her pry open the lid. Only a thin ring of black polish rimmed the edges. Soledad's smile fell. "They didn't leave much," she said accusingly. "That's why people throw things away, because they're used up," Ricky said. Soledad poked out her tongue. She examined the small tin more closely and then exclaimed, "It's still good. I'll show you." She turned and ran down the sidewalk, approaching black-shoed touristas until she found one who agreed to a shine. "Stand still," she ordered, as if preparing to administer a great professional service. With her fingernails, she dug at the polish, smearing it on the shoe bit by bit. Then she spread it with her palm. To buff the shoe, she grabbed the edge of her sack dress and rubbed, nearly sitting on the man's ankles to make her dress reach. The man glanced about, embarrassed. Ricky had always figured people lived like Soledad because they were lazy. But never in his life had he seen anyone work this hard. The long day showed in her weary smile, and still she worked. After finishing, she collected her money and motioned Ricky to follow. "Cripes, Soledad, aren't we about done?" he called. "We have not worked so hard," she emphasized the we. Soledad did not seem to know how to walk slowly. Ricky trotted to keep up. The sandals chafed his feet. Finally, they reached a section of town where the shops and restaurants remained open after dark. Already dim streetlights glowed above the bustling street. Soledad walked directly up to the well-dressed shoppers, both Mexican and tourista, and started begging, her palm extended. At home, Ricky felt guilty whenever he didn't help with work, but here, why should he? He wasn't a ratero. But he did, and finally he stood near Soledad and started holding out his hand to shoppers. Smiling, he looked over at Soledad. "Well, how am I doing?" She scowled. "Beggars aren't happy. Don't smile." Ricky frowned and kept begging. "Please, senor. Please, senorita. Please, senor," he repeated monotonously. Some people looked past him as if he weren't there. Others brushed him aside with a look of disgust. But several stopped. They dug into their pockets or purses and found coins. Soledad glanced over and nodded her approval. "Do you work this hard every day?" Ricky asked. She shook her head. "Most days I work harder." Ricky wondered how she spent her meager earnings. He used his share of the car washing money to buy 2 hot tacos. He offered her one. "I'll help you earn money, but I won't help you waste it," she said, scurrying toward another tourista. Ricky stood with his mouth full, chewing. He was tired of begging, scrounging, digging, and grubbing. He looked forward to getting away from this city. Tomorrow, he promised himself, tomorrow. He was one plane ride away from escaping this hole. From the rear, Soledad approached a heavy man in dark pants and a flowered shirt. He carried a large paper bag of food from the taco stand. Even in the fading light, his bald head gleamed as if polished. She ran in front of the man, hand extended. He brushed her aside. Doggedly, she rushed back and held out her hand. This time, he shoved her and knocked her down. Then the man turned sideways and Ricky saw his face. It was one of the DEA agents who had visited the house, the blimp Dad called Dexter. Sight of the man jarred Ricky. This was the second DEA agent he'd seen. The paunchy bald agent strutted with self-importance. He crossed the street and crawled into a dark sedan. Soledad stood slowly, rubbing her head and squinting hard. Ricky had learned to recognize that look, and it spelled trouble. She tightened her lips and circled, keeping out the glow of the streetlights. Now it was nearly dark. Seconds later, she appeared from the shadows directly behind the agent's car. Inside, the big man had opened his bag and was eating. Ricky saw Soledad crouch and glance around. Then she rolled under the rear of the car. After a minute, her skinny arm reached out around the front tire. Ricky stifled a laugh. The goofy girl was fumbling with the air valve, letting air out of the tire. Ricky moved forward. The only thing better than a flat tire was 2 flat tires, or maybe 3 or 4. For that, Soledad would need help. Ducking low, he angled toward the car. Then silently, he dropped to the pavement and squirmed under the rear axle. Soledad looked back with a start and then smiled and held a finger to her lips. Ricky nodded and reached out around the rear tire. If the agent opened the door, Ricky was ready to roll out the other side and run. He knew Soledad would do the same. Their task took nearly 10 minutes. The sound of people and the loud blaring of street music masked the innocent hiss of air. Each time someone passed on the sidewalk, Ricky and Soledad drew in their arms and waited. Luckily, this was not the busy side of the street. Finally, the car rested on 4 flat tires. Underneath, there was barely room to move. Preparing to squirm out, Ricky noticed the rubber gas line coming from the fuel tank to the engine. He motioned for Soledad to wait while he reached up and twisted the stiff tubing. He wedged it tight against the frame. The car wouldn't go far without gas. Quickly, Ricky slithered out to the sidewalk. Dexter sat munching, not noticing that he now rested 6 inches closer to the ground. Ricky and Soledad crept away from the car to the safety of the alley. They waited, nudging each other with excitement. The agent continued to eat. He scrutinized people as they walked past. Ricky did not mention that he knew the man. Soledad bounced with impatience. A mischievous and challenging look glimmered in her eyes as she picked up a small rock. Before Ricky could stop her, she pitched it and hit the sedan's rear bumper. From the shadows of the alley, they watched the bulky Dexter squirm out and look around. He spotted one of the flat tires and slapped the hood. Then he noticed a second flat tire and swore. "Worthless piece of junk," he shouted. As he walked around the car, he cursed and bellowed louder. Viciously, he kicked at the last tire and looked angrily up and down the street. Shoppers stopped on the sidewalk to watch the sideshow. Ricky and Soledad giggled, holding their breath in the shadows. Dexter headed down the street to a payphone. Seeing the agent so far from the car gave Ricky an idea. This was getting to be fun. "Wait here," he whispered. Keeping the car between himself and the agent half a block away, he ran up and peeked in the window. The bag of food sat on the seat, much of it still not eaten. A red sport jacket caught his eye. It was big enough to be a blanket, and it looked a lot warmer than Soledad's stinky serape. Ricky inched open the door and crawled in. The keys were still in the ignition. First, he rolled up the driver's window and locked the other 3 doors. Then, food and jacket in hand, he slipped out and locked the driver's door. As Ricky rejoined Soledad in the alley, Dexter returned. He walked briskly to the car. When the door refused to open, he jerked hard, squinting in the window toward the ignition. A look of dismay crossed his face. He tried the back door, then strode around, grabbing and testing the others. Again, he squinted through the window, then kicked the door. "Why me?" he shouted. He shook with anger, letting out a loud bellow. Finally, he stumbled back toward the phone, craning his neck to keep an eye glued on the car. "I have an idea," Soledad giggled. Without explaining, she dashed from the alley. "Wait, he's getting mad," Ricky called in a loud whisper. She kept going, dodging people and slipping through the shadows. Again, she stalked the unsuspecting agent. Her actions worried Ricky. No doubt this was to upstage his last prank. The thought struck him. Soledad never waffled things. She barged full tilt into everything she did. He could just imagine her flying a biplane. She would never waffle a loop. While Ricky waited, he went through the jacket he'd taken from the agent. Inside a chest pocket, he found a shiny gold badge in a leather holder. The engraved name read, Dexter Crum. Ricky smiled. The name Crum fit that guy to a T. Examining the leathered holder, Ricky noticed something tucked behind the badge in a small slot. He found a picture and some tightly folded money. In the glow of the streetlight, Ricky counted 3 $100 bills and a single 20. Almost as an afterthought, he held the photograph to the light and squinted. A hammer pounded in his chest. He was staring at his own picture. So he just found a picture of himself in the DEA agent's jacket. All right, I'll see you for chapter 14.